Salamun alaikum. We're back with part 9 of the series on the story of Yusuf. This segment is going to be heavy up here. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you really reflect and understand the strategy and understand the battle of wits that was going on between Yusuf and Yaqub on one side and the brothers on the other side. And you're going to see amazing details come to the surface from within the hur that we're unraveling one part at a time. So we start, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So this is part 9 of the series. I hope you've watched all the other parts in the series before this one. As I said before, we're probably going to go about 30 parts in this series, so it's going to last the whole month, inshallah. Yusuf and Yaqub are going to be communicating in code right in front of our eyes, and you're going to see amazing discussions and conversations going on and the details of the questions that we have not addressed before. So we're going to do some catching up in this segment again. They are sending messages without the message carrier, who are the siblings, the brothers, understanding anything of what's going on. You're going to see for yourself. Again, as I told you before, there are some stories that change your life, change who you are. You cannot undo what you learn from the stories once you really understand them. So the true story of Yusuf in the Quran is one of those events. I call it an event in your life. It is not just a story, it's an event. It changes you. It makes you a different person, a smarter person. And you're going to see toward the end of this segment where the close companions of our beloved ﷺ became so smart and started learning to behave in strategic ways and acquired so much wisdom and so much correct decision-making processes. They learned it from the Quran. They learned it from stories like the story of Yusuf, which is what we're covering in here. Remember, this presentation is at the level of an advanced course. It's a graduate school course, kind of. So please take your time and really allow yourself to be patient with yourself so that you understand what's going on. Please put in the hard work necessary to understand. It's worth it, I promise you. And I hope you're taking notes and following up on tracking the questions so that we can address all your questions eventually, inshallah, by the end of this series. In this segment, we're going to do some catching up. We're going to revisit some lessons that we've learned from the prior ayat. We're going to deal with only 2 ayat, 68 and 69. And we're going to have some really important closing remarks. So please stick around all the way to the end. It's not going to be a long segment, inshallah. So it is worth your time to watch it multiple times if you have the time. So we start with catching up. First, we asked the very important question: why did Yusuf enclose the stock in trade in the chattel of the siblings, of the brothers? And this is a question that we've kind of addressed before a little bit, but we're going to deal with it in a little bit more detail. And you're going to see the amazing revelations that will come through our analysis of such fact, of such. So it was a message delivered from Yusuf to Yaqub without the knowledge of the siblings. In other words, Yusuf intended for the stock and trade to be discovered and realized only after they arrived in their homestead. And we said Yusuf knew their habits, so he knew how to do this properly. And this is why he did what he did. The question is, what other benefit did Yusuf hope to achieve? Well, first, he was telling Yaqub that he was alive in Misr and that he had a leadership position. Where do we get that from? The fact that he knew exactly how to hide the stock in trade clearly delivered the idea, the hint, the ayah, the sign to Yaqub that this is a person who knew what he was doing. He knew the habits of the siblings. The second issue, he had a high-level position, high-level leadership position. We're going to see it in a few seconds. But basically, he was in a position to be able to deliver and execute such a tricky feat of hiding something in the chattel of the siblings without them knowing it. Therefore, he must have been in a very good position to do this. We're going to see more detail, another janah to this fact. The second issue, he was telling Yaqub that the brothers did not recognize him, and therefore, he was telling Yaqub not to trust them. Remember, we said that Yusuf provided accommodation for the brothers. And therefore, he was able to listen in, to understand what they were doing and saying among themselves. We're going to develop even more evidence to this in the rest of the story. But for now, this is a clear evidence that he was sending to Yaqub, pay attention, these guys are up to no good. They're still crooked as I have thought them before. Remember ayah 4 where he said, Inni ra'aytu ahada ashara kawkaban. I've seen all of these guys. So the same thing holds true. He was still telling his father, they're not to be trusted. The third issue, he wanted to force the brothers to return to Misr for further trade in case they took the profits from their trade, from their original trade that Yusuf gave them in Misr, and then decide not to pursue the sale of the younger brother. Let me explain a little bit. So he knew that they're going to sell the trade on the way home before they get to the homestead. He understood this. He was listening in. He knew what they were up to, and therefore he understood that they're going to do this. Now, a strategic type of thinking on the part of Yusuf, a truly brilliant type of thinking. He was considering, okay, they may sell the trade on the way back home, pocket the profits, and leave Yaqub high and dry. In other words, without any provisions, and they don't care. And he was also considering that the sale of the younger brother as a slave may not be enticing enough for them. In other words, he was considering the possibility, slim as it may, that the brothers would decide not to return to Misr, period, not to pursue the sale of the younger brother, and to just pocket the trade, keep the money to themselves, and make up some concocted story, such as we were robbed, whatever story they may come up with. That was a possibility to Yusuf, and therefore he needed to overcome that possibility. So hiding the stock and trade without their knowledge, so that it is discovered only when they get back to their homestead, unraveled their plot, made sure that now they did not have an excuse not to return to get some food, some provisions, because the stock and trade is there. What excuse do you have for not going again to try to make the sale? So not only he revealed their lies, but he forced their hand, he compelled them, راودهم عن أنفسهم, he forced them in a corner to take a position where they cannot say no. There's a clear hint that it was a possibility for them not to go to Misr again, not to leave their homestead and go to Misr again, because to them they already made the profits. They don't care anymore. Yusuf understood this, and he was trying to compel them. I hope it's clear. And thus the siblings, when they discovered their stock and trade returned, they had to admit that they had no excuse but to go to Misr a second time to trade, because they needed the food provisions. They couldn't say no to go back again. And of course they were scandalized in terms of their lie, but that's a different issue. This is a bigger issue. Now, after they were forced to have to go to Misr again, they were forced to tell Yaqub about the condition of sending the younger brother with them. Of course, they didn't tell him that the offer was for Yusuf to buy him. They didn't say that part. But they said, we were required to bring another brother of ours in order to get more provision, or whatever excuse they make. So now they were more stressful. If you read 1265 again, now it becomes clearer. Now the issue of taking the brother with them becomes really pertinent in 1265. And finally, more importantly, Yusuf was asking Yaqub to use the same technique. Remember, these two, Yusuf and Yaqub, were prophets. They were speaking at a different level. So Yaqub learned from Yusuf the technique of sending the younger brother and enclosing him as a message, or enclosing with him a message for Yusuf. I hope it's making sense. I told you, this is going to make you really think and really understand the strategy and what's happening behind the curtain, so to speak. And therefore, the original idea for entering the market through separate doors was therefore Yusuf's idea. I told you the story keeps changing right in front of your eyes. We thought that it was a genius plan that Yaqub developed. And it was a genius plan. But the idea, the flash, the ayah, the sign came to Yaqub through the hidden stock and trade, which was by itself a message that Yusuf sent without the siblings knowing it. I hope you get the idea. So here, now he's telling Yaqub, send me a message without the siblings knowing it. So Yaqub figured out the younger brother had to enter alone in order to be able to deliver this message. And the message would be tucked in or given in secret to the younger brother. So therefore, that message was delivered to Yaqub without the brother's knowledge. And Yusuf was asking Yaqub to send the younger brothers to enter alone, and therefore to provide an opportunity for the younger brother to speak to Yusuf alone. I hope it's really clear. It's really phenomenal. Just a genius kind of communication between the two. Yusuf and Yaqub were speaking their own code, while to the public, to the brothers, it was understood totally differently or understood at a superficial level. That is Wahy. This is Wahy. Wahy is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave our beloved the insight and the direct instructions tucked in, concealed within a text that at its outer level means something very benign to most people. But to those who are understanding the code, it is very insightful. It's very specific, advanced type of communication between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our beloved. So this example that we're watching right here is an example of the Wahy. And that's why I refer you back to ayah 3. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك. We recount to you through the best of the stories, or the most insightful of the stories, the way we enjoin upon you our instructions. This is exactly what's happening. So the story, if we understand it, and if we're living all of these different contextual environments, and who knows what, and what is the message that's being passed back and forth, we understand exactly how the Wahy was taking place to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember, I told you, you're going to get to experience the original knowledge and the process of learning of the original prophethood. This is how beautiful this surah is. There is nothing like it to deliver this amount of heavy load of knowledge and deep insight into what our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going through. Of course, there are other messages to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam that his own quote-unquote brethren, Shu'aib's brethren, were plotting for him, just like the brothers were plotting for Yusuf and his brother. I hope it's very clear. Please take the time and think deeply about what I just said. Really listen to it again. There is a ton of information I just shared with you, and it takes quite a bit of time to really internalize all of this. I hope you do, because it's really worth it. So now we're going to look again at ayah 1263, just to show you how the story unravels more hur, more beauty of what's inside these expressions. فَلَمَّا رَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَبِيهِمْ قَالُوا يَا أَبَانَا مُنِعَ مِنَّا الْكَيْلِ. So when they returned to their father, they lied and said, our father, we were denied our trade. Nonchalantly, kind of, really almost they don't care. مُنِعَ مِنَّا الْكَيْلِ. After the authorities in Misr took our stock in trade, etc., etc. Therefore, send with us our younger brother as a condition for us to receive and bring our trade. فَأَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا أَخَانَا نَكْتَلْ. If you send our brother, then we are liable to get the trade. They didn't give detail. They didn't provide a lot of information. And the whole theme in their discourse is someone who doesn't really care. It is in contrast to what they had said earlier. سَنُرَاوِدُ عَنْهُ أَبَاهُ وَإِنَّا لَفَاعِلُونَ. We're going to try to compel him, and we're going to develop a plan. Well, here, this is the first ayah. This is sort of the starting volley between the brothers and Yaqub. They showed like, we don't care. If you want to send him, that's fine. And by the way, إِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. And they insisted on using the exact language they used with Yusuf, to remind Yaqub that perhaps he doesn't want to do this. So really, if you really truly understand sort of in between the lines of what they were saying, they appear like they don't care if you do or you don't, but this is the fact, and take it or leave it kind of thing. So this is how we understand ayat of the Quran. It's truly a beautiful, beautiful way of unraveling multiple layers. Every time you understand a little bit more, you come back to the same ayat and you see different things. And then all of a sudden you understand more of what's going on, and the psychology and the nafs model of these brothers is unraveling slowly but surely, which tells you a lot about what our own beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam was suffering from his own brethren, from Shu'aib's brethren. And remember, I told you, they never forgot that he won. And therefore, as soon as they had the opportunity, they came back and took the banner of leadership and stole, hijacked, kidnapped Islam that he wanted people to have. This is all based in this surah. It's telling us all sorts of, it's sharing with us the paradigm of what would happen eventually after Yusuf died and after our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam died. You're going to see toward the end of this series, we're going to unravel some significant information that comes directly from the story of Yusuf. And you will understand that the Quran safeguarded for us, for me and you in this age, information about the history of what happened through the model of the story of Yusuf and his siblings and what they did to Yusuf. So inshallah we will get to this in due time. So now we move to ayah 68. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولما دخلوا من حيث أمرهم أبوهم ما كان يغني عنهم من الله من شيء إلا حاجة في نفس يعقوب قضاها وإنه لذو علم لما علمناه ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. And when they entered where through their father ordered them, in other words, they executed the plot or the plan that their father gave them, which is, as you remember, don't enter through a single physical door and attain to your mission through multiple pretexts. So they did this. They entered actually through multiple physical doors. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُم. I want to pay attention now. دَخَلُوا, not دَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ. This is the first ayah. The next ayah, we're going to see دَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ. So dakhalu is used twice in two successive ayah, and now we understand exactly why I told you dakhalu alayhi means something different than dakhalu. ما كان يغني عنهم من الله من شيء. It was of no benefit to them, nor a substitute for Allah's will. We're going to come back to this in just 1 second. إلا حاجة في نفس يعقوب قضاها. But it was for a purpose that Yaqub had kept to himself and achieved. And therefore, he had a plot, he had a plan. The original plan, as he told it to the siblings, failed. We explained what the plan was. But he had an ulterior motive. We're going to see what the ulterior motive is. I just explained a little bit about it in the section about catching up. But now you're going to see more of it. And indeed, he is in possession of privileged knowledge of the type that we have imparted unto him. وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ لِمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most people know not. And this last part, أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, is talking to us. The vast majority of people do not understand this story. This is partly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. So he's addressing us. He's telling us, whatever I just shared with you in this ayah about the plot and about the purpose that Yaqub had kept to himself and whatever plan that he put together had failed, none of this stuff was really truly understood by the majority of the people. And that's why I keep telling you, the majority of the people who followed the traditional story that was imported and superimposed over the Quran is wrong, and this is another proof. This Quran is telling us the majority of people will not believe the truth about this story. They will follow their whims and their fancy and their caprice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, they don't know. They don't understand. Okay, so the question is, مَا كَانَ يُغْنِي عَنْهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. It was of no benefit to them, nor a substitute for Allah's will. What is this ayah telling us? It is telling us that the plan that we just talked about, entering through multiple doors and trying to see if Yusuf can identify the younger brother and allowing the brothers to catch Yusuf in the act, that was all the superficial layer of that plan. Even that plan had ulterior motives. And as I explained a little earlier, there was another layer for that plan. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that plan did not work. And Yaqub knew this. That's why he told them earlier, وَمَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. He was sort of putting a disclaimer on the plan. I'm not sure this is going to work out. So he knew that there is a strong possibility it's not going to work out. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah, ayah 68, is giving us exegetical information. He's telling us, you understand that plan? It did not work. So look for the ulterior motive. So why did Yaqub and Yusuf carry out that discussion and that conversation? And eventually it worked out. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this green part, it was for a purpose, ulterior motive, that Yaqub kept to himself. He did not share with the brothers. And actually he achieved that purpose. He succeeded in getting that part of his plan done. So the general plan did not work out, and he knew there's a high likelihood it would not work out, but he had an ulterior sort of subplot, sub-purpose. That part worked. So what was that part? We're going to see it in the next ayah, ayah 69. The point I'm making here is that this yellow and green part of this ayah is Allah speaking to us, the readers of the Quran, to understand that there was a plot. The plot developed by Yaqub was executed by the brothers, by the children of Yaqub, but still it did not work. That means there was an ulterior motive, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirms, Hajatan fi nafsi Yaqub. There was an ulterior motive that Yaqub kept to himself, and he actually achieved. So this is exegesis. This is tafsir within the Quran. The Quran is doing tafsir to itself, telling us, the readers who are paying attention, that this is what's going to happen in the next couple of ayat. So wake up, learn the truth, and don't be taken by the first layer of understanding or even the second layer of understanding. There are multiple layers of understanding. And to confirm that there's something more complex going on, Allah continues, indeed, he is in possession of privileged knowledge, وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ, of the type that we have imparted unto him, which tells us that if we receive such knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a lot to aspire for. And we have a lot to be happy by seeking such knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he's reminding us, most people do not know. So therefore, Yaqub had ulterior motives. Yaqub knew that there is a likelihood for failure of the plan. He was not really sure of the siblings' commitment to carry out the plan. Remember this. So Yaqub wasn't really sure it's going to work. So he was making a declaration, sort of disclaimer. It may not work. Here the Quran told us it did not work, even though the siblings actually carried it out. So that part, this part right here, he was not sure about the siblings' commitment to the plan. That was not the issue. So the issue was, he knew that Yusuf is more astute than to fall for his plan. Why? Because it was Yusuf himself who delivered the plan in the first place, as I told you. So he understood it's Yusuf's plans. So he was sure Yusuf is going to make that plan fall. So why did Yusuf ask for that plan? Because he wanted the subplot. The subplot, he convinced the siblings to carry out the plan as specified. Why? Because he wanted to deliver a message to Yusuf through the younger brother. In other words, follow the same theme, the same motif. I sent you a secret message without them knowing it. Send me a secret message without them knowing it. I hope it's clear. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. Strategy and tactics and different groups and how they communicate with each other all in front of us in this sort of detective story. In very, very few words, I should add. So as I said, the expression مَا كَانَ يُغْنِي عَنْهُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, it was of no benefit to them, nor a substitute for Allah's will. That is an exegetical note. That is exegesis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing tafsir for our benefit. He's explaining to us, look for additional details or a sub-process or sub-purpose within the plot. There is a plot within a plot. I hope it makes sense. This is strategy. Back in the days when I used to teach corporate strategy, we always used to develop plan B and plan C. If plan A did not work, then plan B. And if plan B did not work, then plan C. And if all of these things do not work, then we have still achieved certain goals and certain purposes. There's always some alternate type of thinking going on beyond the possibility of either success or failure. This is strategy. This is exactly what Yaqub and Yusuf were doing with each other without the siblings knowing it. So now we go to ayah 69. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا عَلَى يُوسُفَ آوَى إِلَيْهِ أَخَاهُ قَالَ إِنِّي أَنَا أَخُوكَ فَلَا تَبْتَئِسْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And when they entered separately in accordance to Yusuf's rules, remember we talked about دَخَلُوا عَلَى, they entered in accordance or in respect or in submission or in agreement with the rules and the expectations of Yusuf. In other words, this is confirming that they did what they were supposed to do. They brought the younger brother as he placed that condition on them. So دَخَلُوا عَلَى Yusuf in accordance with his rule, with his expectations. Clearly confirming, this is the second janah of reading this ayah right here. وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُمْ. So this is twice confirming that they carried out the plan and still the plan did not work out. آوَى إِلَيْهِ أَخَاهُ. He took his younger brother aside and revealed his inner secret to him. This is all awa ilayhi akhahu. We're going to see in just a few seconds where did I get this from. He, Yusuf, said in secret to his brother, clearly, I am your brother, and therefore do not be disheartened by the results they sought or they were seeking, or how they toiled, and their language and their discourse and their plots and their plans, all included in this word يعملون. So Yusuf awa ilayhi akhahu. I want you to remember this verb. This is going to become extremely important for us in the remainder of this surah and in many segments to come, especially in the segments on Surah Al-Ahzab, which we will deal with later inshallah. We're going to see this word, and it is extremely relevant to understand some things about the life of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially his private life. So remember this word, awa ilayhi akhahu qala. Notice here, there's no wow before qala. There's no conjunction and. It did not say awa ilayhi akhahu wa qala. It did not say that. It says awa ilayhi akhahu qala. He took his younger brother aside and revealed his inner secret to him. Qala, he said. So therefore, he is revealing his inner secret, which is he is his brother, meaning he identified his identity. Remember, we said the prime directive for the brothers during their second trip to Misr was what? It was number one, to identify Yusuf. Number two, to bring him back, as we explained in prior segments. So here, Yusuf is voluntarily revealing himself to the younger brother, which tells us that the younger brother, of course, did not recognize Yusuf, but Yusuf recognized the younger brother, and that the younger brother was alone. That's why it was important to see the two janah that we just saw in here. So therefore, Yusuf is revealing the secret of his own identity to his younger brother. He understood that Yaqub pursued the plan as he meant for it to be pursued. Remember, it was his plan anyway. So he knew how to look for it and to avoid falling into that trap. He understood exactly what was going to happen. So now he talked to his younger brother, and clearly there was a message being delivered from Yaqub to Yusuf through the younger brother. Yusuf told his younger brother, I am your brother. So he identified himself to the younger brother because clearly the younger brother would not know him, just like the other siblings would not know him. And perhaps the younger brother was very young in the earlier part of the surah. So he says, فَلَا تَبْتَئِسْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. I am your brother, and therefore do not be disheartened by the results that they have been seeking. So he explained to him the danger he was in. He explained to him what was going on, and he took him aside and he trained him properly in making sure not to go back to the brothers and reveal Yusuf's identity. I hope this is very clear. It's all part of this ayah. So here the new bayina I want to share with you and stress that the verb qala, when it's not preceded by a conjunction such as and or fa, it indicates this is explaining what came before it. So he did this and this and this, he said. When we read he said without and he said, that means this is an explanation of what was before it. So the definition of awa is to share this type of private information or confidential information. So the verb awa indicate to share confidential information. So now we come to the closing remarks. And I told you these are very important closing remarks. So I hope you're awake, you're paying attention, and you take some notes. First remark is a segment of conversation can belong to a different scene even if together with other segments in the same ayah. And we saw this specifically in this series. We saw when the siblings, the brothers were saying, وَمَا أَنْتَ بِمُؤْمِنٍ لَنَا وَلَوْ كُنَّا صَادِقِينَ. You're not going to believe us even if we were truthful. That part is part of a longer ayah. Clearly that part was not said in front of Yaqub. So therefore it was a different discourse. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala included it together with another discourse that happened in front of Yaqub to train us, to teach us that two parts of the same ayah can happen in two different scenes and they may not be related to each other. They're related to the general topic, how they thought to themselves compared to what they said in public or in front of Yaqub. Yes, but Allah is training us. This is part of the bayinat of Zubur, the concealment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to keep some information hidden from the public. As we just saw with Yusuf and Yaqub, some parts of the information was meant to remain codified and hidden from the general public who are reading it. I'm not talking about the Muslims. I'm talking about the non-Muslims, such as the brothers of Shu'aib, who were listening and not paying attention. And it was meant for them to skip it and miss it and not really understand what's going on. How about our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the close companions? Of course, they understood all of this. If not directly through their own toiling, it was through our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam teaching them. I told you this surah teaches you the original process of learning in the tradition of the original prophethood. This is how it was happening, and this is how the wahy was being delivered to our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, the second remark, it is not enough for us to claim that we understand a conversation segment. We need, in addition, to understand 10 different things. I need to pay attention because this is what it takes to do toiling on the stories. We haven't discussed this level of details before, but this is really important to comprehend and to take it seriously. This is not just anybody who's reading like he's reading poetry and just blabbing and just translating at random. You have to dive into a lot of details in order to understand ahsan al-qasas, the most insightful of stories. So, the things we need to learn. First, who is the speaker? In many cases, the ayat doesn't tell us who the speaker is, and we saw many examples. We need to understand what locution is the speaker using, because it tells us what group he's part of. Sometimes the locution tells us who the speaker is, and sometimes the speaker defines what locution that speaker is using, and vice versa. So we have to ask all of these questions. We have to ask the question, what the speaker knew at the time he or she said what they said. Of course, that's obvious, right? But who is being addressed by the speaker? In other words, what was the speaker thinking as he was trying to deliver that message or saying what he wanted to say? What he meant to tell the addressee. As we saw between Yaqub and Yusuf, there was some communication going on through the text, but the addressees, meaning the brothers who were supposed to carry the messages back and forth, did not understand them. So they meant for the brothers to understand one thing, but below the surface, and we're going to see this in the report of the king, we're going to see that Yusuf replied with a codified message that the messenger himself did not understand. We need to learn who else heard the message, who was there to listen. So in the case of conversation between Yaqub and the siblings, the younger brother was there. Much earlier on, again, during the conversations between Yaqub and the siblings, Yusuf was there. So Yusuf was listening. So Yaqub was saying certain words. The siblings understood them in one way. Yusuf understood them in a totally different way. So we need to understand what that person who might have been there, who was there, heard the message, what that person understood from the original message. We also need to understand what changes took place in the process of transmitting the message. So in the case of the ex-prison mate for Yusuf, we will see this later in part 2 of this story. The ex-prison mate carried out a message from Yusuf to the king. He himself did not understand it, but he did not modify it. And that's why the Quran made sure to tell us that the job of a Rasul is to deliver verbatim. In our case, our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, during the period in Mecca, he was delivering verbatim the message, but sometimes he did not understand them. And the proof is, the Quran told him, وَلَا تَعْجَلْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يُقْضَى إِلَيْكَ وَحْيُهُ وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Don't rush, and wait and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase you in knowledge. That proves that he was not fully knowledgeable about what he was reciting. So this is exactly the issue. The messenger may corrupt the message during the transmission process. This is exactly the fault of all the hadith narrations and all the traditions that we have in our books. For 200 or 300 years, most of this stuff was only orally transmitted, not verbatim. And they tell you this, and they admit this. And therefore, we don't know what kind of corruption entered all of these reports and narrations and stories and all of these books of tafsir that were not documented for hundreds of years. We know this for a fact. So therefore, we see it right in front of our eyes. Surah Yussuf teaches us this. So therefore, Yusuf did not trust the brothers to carry the message. He hid the message so it gets delivered intact at the time of them arriving at their homestead. We also need to understand what is the locution of the addressee. The people who are being addressed by the message, do they share the same locution? And we saw this in the case of how to circumcise a she-cow. There was a confusion because different people in the conversation made wrong assumptions about the locution that was being used. In that case, they were making deliberate, cynical comments of تَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا. You're abusing the divine lexicon. Number 9, what does the addressee know? We have to remember this. So in the case of Yusuf, Yusuf knew about the brothers, some things that Yaqub did not know. So by hiding the stock in trade and sending it to be discovered by Yaqub later, he was telling Yaqub, don't trust the siblings. In other words, Yusuf knew that Yaqub did not know what he knew. And therefore he was delivering extra semantic value within the stock and trade as a message. I hope this is all clear. This is becoming more and more unraveled as we go. I told you this is a complex story, but it's a fascinating story. It's really beautiful, much, much more elegant and sophisticated than the simplistic Disney-like story they told us in the books of tafsir. And then finally, what did the addressee understand from that message? As we explained, Yaqub understand from the stock and trade that was hidden some things that is much more serious and significant than the siblings understood, even though they were the ones carrying that message between double quotes, without knowing it. This is ta'wil al-ahadith. This is the interpretation of discourse that was referred to in ayah 12:5. So therefore, Surah Yusuf, among other purposes, it has the purpose of teaching us, just like it taught our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, ta'wil al-ahadith. I hope this is ringing a bell. I hope this is making sense how significantly interlinked and interweaved every aspect of the surah is. So therefore, discovering and uncovering the details in Quranic stories leads to insight, and then these stories become ahsanul qasas. I hope this is making sense to you. And as we said before, where did you think our beloved and the close companions learned strategic thinking and planning to carry out the military successes and other successes that they carried out during their lives? It was, of course, from Ahsanul Qasas, the most insightful of stories. And finally, I want to leave you with one thing to reflect on. The reported prophetic narration that Yusuf was given Shatr al-Husn. There's a hadith that claims that our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that Yusuf was given Shatr al-Husn, half of Husn. Begs the question, who was given the other half? And the obvious answer is Yaqub. Yaqub and Yusuf were communicating through the siblings, even though the siblings themselves did not understand the insights within the messages they themselves were carrying. And we will see the ex-prison mate for Yusuf, after he gets out of prison, brings back the report to Yusuf. Yusuf interprets the report and sends the conclusion. The conclusion is being sent back to the Malik, to the king, without the prison mate truly understanding what Yusuf said. This is exactly the issue of Yaqub and Yusuf sharing the insights, each one half of it, without the rest of the public knowing anything about it. And with this, we come to the conclusion of this episode, of this segment in the series. I hope you really enjoyed it. This has been a lot of fun for me over the last few years, discovering all of this information. And I'm so happy and so excited that I'm finally able to disclose it to you so that you can learn it. And I take it off my chest, so to speak. And we close with the dua. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. Alhamdulillah. لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق. I thank you very much for watching. Salamun alaikum.